and welcome back to Pub for Heretics. Now we're going to be going through our podcast all over again, but today we're going to be doing Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children, obviously.
Yep.
Are you keen and excited?
I'm very excited for, especially after we bought the box, Emperor's Children box. Yeah, I'm very excited to.
And this will also be the first time as well that we're recording our podcast episodes and actually doing them like this.
Yeah. Still working stuff out, but yes, definitely.
But yeah, still figuring out all this, whatever this is. I don't even know what half of this is.
This is my domain.
This is your domain. This is
your domain.
That is my domain. Yes. But yes, thank you for joining in. Like and subscribe, please. We're still trying to get out of, I'll say small channel hell, but everyone's actually been really lovely to us lately.
Yeah, it's still small channel hell.
Yeah. Anything below 5K.
Well, that's what we're on the road to.
Road to 5.
Road to 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first things first, straight off the bat, get stuck into it. Today is going to be a very pink day, very purple day. That's why I got the pink monster.
Oh, pink and purple. Yes.
Yes.
Like, what's pink? Yes. Yeah, very pink
Pink's
day.
a singer, but yes. So what do you know about Fulgrim? Like, just taking into account everything that we've said and done and what we've been going over, what do you know about Fulgrim?
I know that he is like the excess, like everything to an excess amount. So like pain, especially pain is like an excess, like pain gives them pleasure sort of thing. And that's vice versa.
So that's very much like the end result of where they are at the moment, which is fair because that's all you've seen, especially from the models. But do you know anything about the history, about how they got to that point?
Oh, not really. No, we haven't gone over like how he actually turned to. Was it Slanesh? Yes, Slanesh. Yeah.
He's remembering people.
Yeah. So yeah, I haven't really done too much with that. Yeah, but I know that he is. I know that they're like the. I don't know, like the kink sort of.
Traditionally, yes.
Yeah, like they're the.
They're that side of the
Yeah,
dark,
the very 18+ side.
Yes. Well, to be fair, all of it is. But anyways, so nothing else. You don't know anything about it.
Not really. Not in the way of like the Space Marines. I know that. Like there are like noise Marines. You know, they're like the heavy metal guitar, that sort of side. But I don't know why they are.
They ended up that way, going from like a normal Space Marine to this. Yeah.
Especially like if you look at like something like they started off basically as like Ultramarines, like to begin with, and then
like default,
default, and then how did they go to that? Like, that's the stuff that I don't know.
Well, that's what we're going to be going through today, hopefully. So
yes,
this is going to be probably a long episode as well, just because there is so much to get through with Fulgrim. And when I'm deciding what stories should fit with which Primarch, because sometimes these stories are intersected with others, I'm going to try my best to give him the best history and origin story I can of Fulgrim and the deeper inner thinkings of how he thinks and how he's written. I'm not going to mention all of it just because simply there is so much of it, but I'm going to try and do my best, okay?
Yeah.
So to point out what we also do is we at the beginning of our podcast episodes, we mention which books we've read and where we've gotten the sources from. Not also, but mainly for two reasons. One, because it's to let the audience know that at least I'm speaking with some sort of, I've read this book. I know what happens in this book. I'm not just reading it from the wiki or the lexicon. But it's also because it gives you guys knowledge as to where to find these stories if you want to read your own perspective on the story. And the way that I'm interpreting it might be wrong compared to how you guys might interpret it. But I also want to give you that opportunity to go read these books. So the books that I've read is his Primarch book, The Palatine Phoenix, the Fulgrim book over here from the Horus Heresy, which I believe is the 5th book. And then I've read Angel Exterminatus. Despite the fact that's a Iron Warriors storyline, it's heavily intersected with Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children. I'm not going to be mentioning that storyline as much this time around because I'm saving that for Perturabo and the Iron Warriors. I've read Saturnine, which is where one of the books in the Siege of Terror books where Fulgrim comes face to face with Dawn.
Okay, cool.
And then I've also read Renegades of Excess and the first Fabius Bile book in the trilogy, but I'm making my way through those slowly. I have purchased Genefather and Eidolon, but I have not got around to reading them yet because I didn't think reading Eidolon. I thought reading Eidolon was going to be important because I thought they were going to be bringing out an Eidolon mini, but they haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even as of recording, they've only just
Released a base, yeah.
like on Sunday.
Yeah.
They've announced what they're releasing for pre-order for this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So they've only got, I think it's
Fulgrim, the Coffin Eye Lord, and then the Lord Exultant, Tormentors and Fractors, and the Noise Marines. And the Flawless Blades.
And
there might be something else.
And Lucius, I think.
And Lucius, yes, of course.
Is on there as well.
So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through Fulgrim today. Next week it's going to be Emperor's Children in general. And then it's going to be Lucius. And then there's going to be a secret episode as well.
Mm.
Are you ready to take your wargaming to the next level? Look no further than Games Village, your one-stop shop for everything Warhammer and wargaming right here in Upper Coomera on the beautiful Gold Coast.
Whether you're a seasoned veteran or a new player, Gamers Village has everything you need, from miniatures and paints to rulebooks and accessories. Plus, they've got a fantastic community for players to connect, compete, and grow their skills.
Visit Gamers Village today in Upper Coomera or check them out online for all your wargaming needs. Your next great battle is awaiting. Gamers Village, where your wargaming adventure begins. About a member of the Emperor's Children. See if you can try and guess it in the comments section. But
I know it starts with R, so there you go.
Oh, you spoiled the surprise.
yeah, so now they figured out what it is.
Oh, okay. I don't know. So
I just had on my board a secret R episode.
yeah, it just said R. I'm like,
So we're going to be going through that. And then we're also going to be considering doing a rehash of our older episodes about how we were going through the history of 40K, just so you get you a bit more up to speed and try and condense it a little bit better so that way you understand the sequence of events.
Yep. And also the podcast might be changing a little bit. As you could probably tell, it's just me and Blake here. So that's why I think we're going to do like a bit of a rehash.
Because the dynamic will have shifted.
Yeah.
Instead of Top Gear, it's going to be Ted Lasso and Coach Beard.
Yeah. Or, there's another one I was thinking of. Sorry, keep going.
Not so good. Anyway, so yes, we're going to go straight into that. So each Primarch had a purpose as to why the Emperor created them. So, for example, can you guess what Gilliman's was?
Well, isn't he like attack? Like, isn't he?
No, Gilliman. Like, so what would his purpose be in the Imperium?
Oh, Gilliman. Well, wasn't he pseudo like in charge?
He is the statesman.
He's like, oh, yeah,
And,
okay.
well, like, a pseudo leader of, like maintaining order.
Yep.
What do you think the Lions was?
I don't know.
He was the exterminator.
He's the exterminator. Okay.
He was the one that was meant to take out the threats that, no one else was really meant to know about.
Yeah, because I know Dawn would have been like defense.
Pure defense.
Yeah.
So, what do you think Fulgrim's purpose is? Now, obviously, this is heavily debated, but you can sort of tell that this is where his heavily leaned towards.
Fulgrim was in charge of the party and the orgies and all the sescapades.
Other beeped out words. Thank you, YouTube.
Oh, I should.
Yes.
Yeah.
Use the beep. But yeah. May as well use it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, if whenever you do it, I'll just get beep. But yes, no. Fair enough why you went to that assumption. Fulgrim was the diplomat.
Really?
He's meant to be the charismatic one.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And he is essentially the face man of the Emperor.
Yeah.
That's what his whole, I'd say, facade was.
Yeah.
And he did a good job of it.
Okay.
So straight off the bat, story is always it always is. Yeah. What do you think we're going to start with?
In the beginning.
In the beginning. In the beginning.
Yeah. Good point. All the Primarch babies got yeeted into the warp by the chaos.
Yep.
Because they understood that the Primarchs were going to be a great threat. So Do you remember the other planets that we were talking about that the other Primarchs have gone to? Like, can you give me a bit of an idea? Just because they're so varied and
The
different.
Space Wolves was
Fenris, which is a
Fenris.
frozen wasteland.
Frozen.
And then you've got, which is also a death world. And then you've got the other spectrum of that, which was Vulcan on the death world of Nocturne, which was basically Mustafar from Star Wars,
Yeah.
fire everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you've got Gilliman, who basically landed in Space Rome.
Yeah.
And then just like the planets that the Primarchs landed on, like Lion landed on a planet with a forest full of monsters,
Yeah.
which was also another death world.
Yeah.
These Primarchs landed on these worlds so different, but it weirdly fit their personalities. It's almost like as if they were either sent there by chaos or that the warp spit them out onto the planets that they were best suited for.
Like it almost like it like not read their mind, but like could see their potential and then
exactly.
put them in the best place for their
So
potential.
Fulgrim landed on a planet named Chemos.
Okay.
Chemos, just so you know how it's spelled. This world orbited a small star and the world was in perpetual twilight.
Okay.
So just to get you, it was a bleak and horrible place to live.
Yep.
This planet was heavily dependent on the supplies coming from the other human colonies. But then the Age of Strife happened, which was the birth of which god?
Slanesh.
Slanesh.
Yeah.
And because of the birth of Slanesh, the warp storms just went all over the galaxy and cut off humanity from all of its colonies.
Okay.
And then humanity went down.
Yep.
It was a mining world, and the birth of Slanesh caused all these warp storms, and then humanity was cut off from each other. The planet was, again, dependent on continuous resource supplies from these chips, but they didn't come anymore because of the warp storms.
Okay.
So they were left to fend for themselves.
Yep.
It got so bad to the point that the people were not even able to really create enough food for themselves, let alone the rest of the population.
Okay.
The entire population had to monitor and work the machinery every hour of every day. This planet went full survival mode. So it had, because it had to. There was nothing else they could do. So they had to work these machines, make sure there was enough food, and the machinery couldn't break. Otherwise, they were all screwed. But everything else was sacrificed to survival. So no leisure, no fun or happiness, no art, no poetry, no music, because it all had to go to work to make sure that these machines stayed alive so that everybody could stay alive.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Chemos was just pushed into a slow death.
Yep.
The planet had this military branch called the Caretakers, and they were to make sure that everybody was working.
Mm-hmm.
But then 2 Caretakers came across a metal capsule that fell from the sky. Any guess what that is?
Clark Kent.
Yes.
Yep.
But no, not too dissimilar either, as it contained a silver-haired baby. These 2 Caretakers begged the government to spare the baby because all orphans on this world were killed so that they were not trained in draining the resources.
Okay. Yeah.
The 2 Caretakers, Corin and Tula, raised Fulgrim as their own. Fulgrim was named Fulgrim after an ancient Camosian deity and was seen as a miracle because in a few short years, he was able to provide the same work as a full-day laborer. And because of his Primarch brain, he was able to figure out the tech quite quickly.
Yep.
He was able to see how it all worked and then how he could improve it and then how he could make it better. And when it broke, he could fix it. By the time he was 15, he was no longer a laborer and became to the rank of executive. And executives were the big boys. And was able to make connections with the other fortress machineries and factories and discover old tech and actually began creating a surplus of these resources. So he, just through middle management, was able to turn this world around and help it fix itself. He was then quickly elevated to planetary leader.
Okay.
Fulgrim is the only Primarch that took over control of his planet, of his home world, without violence.
Oh, wow.
He's through pure diplomatic,
Yeah.
and through him trying to work together with other people and making these connections with everybody, and everybody elevating him because of what he'd done, he was able to become leader of Chemos.
Yeah. Okay.
Obviously, fair enough. Like he still slaughtered the cannibal tribes and still had to take out the sulfur tribes that believed the only thing humanity was good at was dancing and fighting. And Fulgrim said he somehow respected that viewpoint. But then he started a new renaissance on Chemos. He was able to have the population not worry so much about work. So they were able to focus on things like art, poetry, music, all the arts and everything like that. So they were able to actually enjoy life.
Okay.
So he was genuinely like seen him as a messiah in that regard. And then the big man himself came along.
Gilliman?
No.
What?
The emperor came along.
Oh.
Because the emperor went on the big crusade, the great crusade to try and find his sons and also to reconnect the rest of humanity.
So he did find Fulgrim. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the emperor found all of his sons. So, found out all of them by himself. Like he was the first one to introduce himself as best to my best recollection.
Okay.
And with one look from Fulgrim, Fulgrim realized who this was.
Yep.
And then bent the knee immediately and swore fealty to Big E.
Wow.
Realizing that this was his long lost father.
Okay.
He was then taken back to Terra, where he was introduced to his Space Marine Legion, which was the Third Legion.
Yeah.
And he was confronted with only 200 Space Marines.
Oh, yeah, because they all had... There was like that cap, wasn't there?
No,
they hadn't gotten to that
Hadn't gotten to that point. There's nothing to do with this. Only 200 Space Marine Legions. And he had heard of his other brothers having Marines of over 80,000 to 100,000, but he said, this is your whole Legion. And it's just 200 Space Marines.
Okay.
Do you want to know why that is?
Yes. That is a bit weird.
He learned something had horribly gone wrong in their past. A viral accident had caused his gene seed repositories to be destroyed. And gene seed is how you create more Space Marines.
Oh, from him. So his...
Well, without a pure sample coming from Fulgrim, the Space Marine Legion just slowly withered and died.
Yeah.
Or was dying.
And so there was only 200 left.
We're going to get into the specifics as to why that happened in the next Emperor's Children episode, but essentially a viral outbreak happened and a blight was on his gene seed where they just couldn't replenish.
Okay.
And because through natural fighting and unable to recover the gene seed because, the nature of battle, it was just slowly diminishing, and they were also going into a slow death as well. So you see the comparisons between Chemos and the Space Marine.
Yeah.
So from there on, Fulgrim had led a rousing speech, and this speech was so inspiring that he named his legion the Emperor's Children.
Yeah.
And the Emperor had also given this legion the honor of wearing his personal standard on their chest plates and in their armor. So it's called the Palatine Aquila. These Emperor's Children are the only Space Marine legions that were allowed to wear it. This is the same thing that Emperor's advisors and the Custodes were allowed to wear, but nobody else.
Okay.
It
so
is
even Gilliman was
not even Gilliman, nobody else, not even Horus, not even the War Master's boys were allowed to wear this. Only the Emperor's Children and Fulgrim were allowed to wear the Palatine Aquila, which is a huge honor. And again, we're going to get into the specific reason as to why that is in the next Emperor's Children episode. But it was also a culmination of Fulgrim doing this rousing speech about how we're going to try and do our best to get back to where we should be.
Yeah, okay.
And this, for me, was kind of the beginning of Fulgrim's demise in my head. Because the problem is that Fulgrim, even when he was living on Chemos, had this strive to make everything as perfect as he possibly could. Because the more perfect you make it, the less it'll break down. And the less it'll break down, the more time you have to fix other things.
Yeah.
So this sort of mentality reinforced that. And then also on top of that, finding out that his legion was only down to 200 Marines. And then on top of that, he's now got this giant expectation to live up to that nobody else has, but he does.
He's the Emperor's Child, and he's got that sigil. But
it's also the mentality of like, this is like, because Fulgrim became racked with the idea of how he had to live up with those expectations, that informed the rest of his choices from here on out. Because he felt like he had to meet those expectations. Yeah. He didn't have to meet them. He wanted to exceed them. Yeah. He wanted to be better than Gilliman. He wanted to be better than Dawn. Because the problem was that he was incredibly jealous of Gilliman and Dawn.
Oh, yeah.
Because Gilliman and Dawn, by the time they were discovered by the Emperor, had already had solar system-wide empires. But to be fair, Dawn, I don't know the specifics of Dawn, but he was able to have multiple planets under his control. And Gilliman also sort of inherited the Ultramar Empire.
Yeah.
But also he also expanded it as well, so let's not discount him.
Yeah.
But the thing is that this is where the comparison becomes the thief of joy, because most of all the Primarchs only had one planet.
Yeah.
Because Fulgrim was comparing himself to Gilliman and Dawn, but even Horus only had Chthoniya. Only Jagatai Khan only had Chigoris. Perturaba only had Olympia, as far as I know. And like all these other Primarchs only had one planet, but he was comparing himself to the exceptions.
Yeah, he was comparing himself to the top.
Hmm.
Because I'm guessing, being the diplomat, he probably wanted to be the top of the food chain, like just under the emperor.
Yeah. Well, it's not even that, as well as that he wanted to be as big as the expectations that were put upon him.
Yeah.
And then he compared that to the works of his best brothers, not caring the fact that those two were the exceptions and that everybody else, including
on the
Horus,
same.
only had one planet.
Yeah.
But he
on the
saw them
same-
have hundreds and
Yeah.
whatever.
I'm guessing the emperor found what, Gilliman first when he went looking?
No. Horus.
Oh, he found Horus first.
This is why we're going to be going through the condensed history of both the timeline and the Horus heresy, because a lot of this stuff is important.
Yeah.
So Horus was the first one found, and then they had a couple of decades to themselves, which is why Emperor and the Horus had such a close relationship.
Yeah.
And then it was Lehman Russ, and then it was the missing Primarch, and then it was, I think it was Ferrus Manus, and then a couple of others. So Fulgrim was sort of in the middle.
And so was Gilliman, by the sound of it.
Gilliman and Dawn were in the middle as well. Towards the front, I think, but like,
Because that's what I was thinking. Maybe he's had more time with them than what he had with the other ones. Like if they
it was around the same time. I did have a list of it somewhere, and it is on the lexicon. But no, it's because he just wanted to be the best and become the best out of pride, but also because he felt like he had to meet those expectations.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Well,
any rich kid or any jock or anybody with expectation issues, it's basically that.
Yeah.
But yes, he was then given his own battle barge, which he named, guess this, the Pride of the Emperor.
Okay.
Yeah. So Gilman's is McCragg's Honor. The Lion's is the Invincible Reason. That's the Lion's flagship name.
Invincible Reason.
So the flagships also do inform the characters a little bit.
Yeah.
But yes. So going further, after this, he went down to what are known as Mount Nerodonia, which is where the biggest forges are.
Okay. Yep.
This is where he interacted with a Primarch, one of his brothers, named Ferrus Manus.
Okay.
Do you remember much about Ferrus Manus?
So he's in charge of the Iron Fist?
Iron Hands.
Iron Hands.
And the reason will become apparent in a second, because they formed an instant connection with their first meeting. When Ferrus was toiling away with the Forge Masters, both Fulgrim and Ferrus had like a shared idea of alchemy and like smithing and craftsmanship, obviously. So he came along and he saw Ferrus literally beating the minerals and with his own hands because he literally has iron hands.
Iron Hands, yeah.
And Fulgrim told Ferrus that he could come and create a better weapon than this forge has ever seen. Ferrus laughed and said someone with such pasty hands would never equal his own metal hands. Then the challenge began, and they both worked without pause for weeks, trying to create the best weapon better than the other. Friendly insulting each other as they do with each other.
Yeah.
After 3 months, they both finished. Fulgrim created a giant silver hammer in which he named Forgebreaker.
Jeez, okay.
And Ferrus created a beautiful golden sword that forever burned with the fire of the forge. And he named it Fireblade. Upon seeing each other's works, they both declared the other the victor. And, and in a show of eternal friendship, they swapped weapons.
I was going to say, I feel like...
It sounds like they made weapons for each other.
Yeah, I feel like the hammer is perfect for Iron Hands.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so Ferrus Manus ended up with Forgebreaker, which apparently could level a mountain, but, just embellishment. And then Fireblade, which is like a beautiful golden sword, which when activated burns,
Yeah.
was given to Fulgrim. And they both carried these weapons for a while, for a long time.
Okay.
I didn't want to say forever because they didn't.
Yeah, I was
but
going to say.
we'll get to that in a second. But they ended up becoming the closest friends. Like, even though Fulgrim and Horus were close to each other, the friendship between Ferrus and Fulgrim was arguably the strongest friendship out of all of them. Maybe save for Horus and Sanguinius, but that's about it.
So, Iron Hands,
Mm-hmm.
are they on the Chaos side or are they on the...
We'll get to that.
So they are loyalists.
We'll get to that in a second.
That's just interesting, like, because I do notice, I mean, it's probably...
There's very much yin yang.
Yeah, like...
So the thing is that even though Ferrus... And like after the two, this is getting back to this as well. This is actually further pointing out what you're saying. After the two of them created their weapons, they both went back to the Imperial Palace, where Sanguinius had arrived, coming along with exquisite gifts from Baal, like beautiful ruby gems and plenty of beautifully carved marble statues. And then Fulgrim's just like enthralled with this. He's like, finally, another brother that actually appreciates the finer things.
Yeah.
And Ferrus laughed and said, "What a waste. We should be focusing on how we can better ourselves in terms of taking over the galaxy." And then Fulgrim laughed and called him a terrible Gorgon. Ferrus laughed and said, "I like the name," which is how Ferrus Manus was given the name the Gorgon, because he also comes from the planet of Medusa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it all ties in with that.
Yeah.
So Ferrus coming from Medusa, Fulgrim called him a terrible Gorgon. And then and then when people hear that that's his nickname, they're just like, what? That sounds like an insult. And they're like, no, it's not, because it's friendly brother shit.
Friendly brother.
Yeah. And yeah. So after that, they all became like close friends. Like, this was an eternal friendship that lasted over hundreds of years. The problem was that because of the size of Fulgrim's legion only being 200 Marines, and even though he was getting pure samples of his DNA taken out so they could create more gene seed, it's still a slow process.
Yeah. Still creating
that many legionnaires to come up to get up to proper legion size takes a while.
Yeah.
So he was unable to conduct an expedition fleet of his own. So he was assigned to be with his brother's legion, Horus and the Lunar Wolves, aka the future Black Legion.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So this is also where Fulgrim had a close relationship with Horus.
Yeah.
After almost a century, because Primarchs lived for a long time, I've heard some people say it was over a century. I heard some people say that it was only 8 decades. There's some but it was around that time. Yeah. After working alongside the Lunar Wolves and seeing how they conduct war, they eventually were able to swell their own ranks to a proper legion size. Now, this is where the Primarch book comes into it. I highly recommend that if anybody wants to read any more about Fulgrim and learn more about the Emperor's Children, go book 5 of the Horus Heresy, Fulgrim, and then read his Primarch book, because this is basically the building blocks of how you can understand Fulgrim. So it actually opens really quite lovely, where he comes out into his estate room, and he has 2 marble busts of his foster parents, Corin and Tula, and he just looks at them and says, "You did the best you could." Like, so that it's a beautiful moment in my opinion, because it stuck out in me in the book, because it shows that he is capable of humility, and he is capable of appreciating people that are trying. And I'm sure they weren't the best foster parents. There's no actual book, as far as I'm aware, of him actually growing up on chemos.
Oh, right.
So most of this is just from other things that he has said.
Okay, so even in the books, like, it doesn't really explain.
It doesn't actually. Like, the book explicitly shows Corin and Tula finding him in the plant, and then it just skips that all the way up until now.
Okay, up until what?
Yeah, so him growing up in chemos, there's no actual book on it.
And what about the Emperor?
Major excerpt.
The Emperor finding him?
Until not even the Emperor finding him.
Oh, so it's literally from birth.
From that, yeah.
Until he...
It's all about, like, hearsay, people saying this happened and then giving their stories about it. So there's no explicit detail of what it was like growing up in chemos, but you can assume from how he tells it how hard it was. Yeah. But he does show appreciation to Tula and Corin.
Okay.
Which I find very interesting, because all the Primarchs that ended up becoming traitors, even Conrad Kurz, even Angron, they still showed levels of humility and that connection to humanity. And so does Fulgrim. And I just think it's really interesting and why I get drawn to Chaos characters in terms of the writing.
Yeah.
But yes, Fulgrim saw this new Imperium system and he saw it like one of those old things he was fixing on Chemos. This is a broken system. There's a better way in which we can conduct this crusade.
Yep.
And this Imperium can be better. He didn't like that Ferris. He didn't like Ferris and Horus and all the others, Lehman Russ, about how they conducted war in terms of going straight to it as a solution. Like, we have to conquer this planet and then move on. Being the diplomat, he's like, there's a better way we can do it.
Yeah.
7 of his brothers, including Horus, said that he wasn't ready to strike it out on his own. And Lehman Russ challenged him and suggested that he be given the 28th Expedition Fleet because 28 is a positive integer and a perfect number.
Okay.
And he said, amazing that Russ knows math.
Yeah.
and he said, and to quote him, he says, I think they pity us and I won't have it. So the idea of anybody looking down on him is where the pride pass aspect comes into it. And he thought Russ would understand about the whole only conquering one planet thing and would actually be like connecting with him on that.
Yeah.
But the thing is that to Russ, Fenris was the only world that counted.
Yeah.
Whereas Fulgrim, it was never enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah. He ended up taking the expedition fleet and then he took only 7 other Marines to conquer a planet.
So, like 7
Marines.
individual.
I'm not saying 7 cohorts. I'm not saying 7 companies. 7 Marines.
Jesus.
One of them was Fabius Bile. So he only took 7 of his Marines.
Yeah.
And do you want to know why?
Why?
To take the piss out of the 7 brothers that challenged him on that.
Yeah.
So he's like saying that one to represent each
one of them. Yeah. So he took what? Him?
He took a mixture of the 200 veterans and then he also took some of his new Marines as well that he had created.
Okay.
That like the new recruits.
Yep.
He wanted a mixture of both to prove themselves.
Yep.
Not one of them died, just so you know.
Really?
No. Oh no, hang on, sorry. One did die.
Oh.
For reasons I'll say in a second. So, but like the other reason why he did this is because Russ took over a planet with 800 Marines. Horus took one with 80. So I'm going to take one with 8, including myself.
Yeah.
And then just, when he was taking over the planet, it was a mixture of like Game of Thrones level espionage. And then he's just like drinking his wine chalice and he's like, oh, someone tried to poison me. and then the next night he drinks another one and he's like, they're not learning, are they?
More poison.
Yeah. And the human diplomats that he brought down with him were also well versed in that. And they also had like poison feeding, like poison filtrating systems. And they're just like, oh, they will never learn.
This is not the way to kill me.
Yeah, exactly. So he ended up having to fight eventually.
Yeah.
He then told the leader on the battlefield that he will take his sons and honor them by making them his sons instead. I'm going to take your sons and turn them into my own emperor's children, and they're going to be my sons. As like the biggest FU you could think of.
Yeah.
And that would also end his family's line and noble line.
Yeah.
Because they can't have kids when they become Marines. So yeah, that was also a bit, but that's also the pettiness now of him coming into play.
Yeah.
He was able to corral all of his this is the part that I found really interesting with this book. He was able to corral all of his enemies into a single location and gather all the faction leaders to like a religiously significant place of their culture. He took only 6 of his 7 sons with him, leaving one guard behind to guard the royalty.
Yeah.
They absolutely destroyed them. Hundreds of them jumped out. They jumped out of the Thunderhawk, and they all landed like missiles hitting the ground, and then utterly massacred the insurrectionists. This was Fulgrim's moment. This is his moment. This is the first planet he's taking over. He went down to the crypt of the religious icon and found hundreds of them waiting for him, telling him that he was a child in a god's body, which is also not wrong.
Yeah.
and he was just so easy to provoke
Yeah.
because Fulgrim wasn't listening to what they were saying. He was listening to the generators that were humming below the floorboards.
Because
And he's like, stop. I've heard this sound before on Terra. And then it cuts to a memory of Ferris showing him something from old Earth tech and realized he was standing above an atomic bomb. This was a trap. He tried getting to the bomb, but he had to carve and trample his way through hundreds of men, ungracefully, might I add, which annoyed him to no end. His cloak was ripped. One man was able to empty the whole clip into the Palatine Aquila on his chest and breaking it, which is another dishonorable thing that he now has to carry. And he was able to slaughter them all, shambled to the bomb, tried to remember what Ferris told him about how to stop the bomb, and then he pulled out Fireblade, stabbed it through the right spot, stopped the bomb.
wow.
Yeah. But like with seconds to spare.
Yeah.
Fulgrim then raced back to the palace where he left one of his sons guard, and where the politician had been allied were able to wound the Marine he had left behind. So he didn't die. I was wrong. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But was able to wound him with an older Earth Tech's blade that was able to cut through Saramite.
Yeah.
In the last moments of this book, it's really interesting because he's talking to his chief iterator, the woman that was just like, oh, they're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
Talking about how he called out Fulgrim for still falling to violence,
Yeah.
just like his brother said he would.
Yeah.
And they started talking about philosophy of attaining perfection, that if you only focus on the desire of ideal perfection instead of the journey, you'll never actually obtain perfection. Yeah. And Fulgrim said, well, some people have more patience than me. And admitted that his pride got the better of him.
Yeah. Far out.
And it also didn't help that he gave himself the limitation of having to take the planet in a month.
Yeah.
With only 7 Marines.
Yeah. I mean, he could have gone with more people and have more time, but he wanted to be cocky and
yeah.
That's great.
So I know that this has been going on for a minute, but like I think that these are foundational blocks as to how he thinks, and I think it's very important. So obviously he was very eager to prove himself after leaving the Lunar Wolves. He then came across a race of race of Xenos called the Laer. Laer, that's how you spell it. The Laer.
Okay.
A serpentine race of creatures that one does not look the same as the other. For reasons why you'll find out in a second. But are you with me so far?
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is where he's getting his snake.
It's funny that you're coming to that conclusion. But okay, so Laer destroyed all of the Imperial scout ships. They were actually technologically advanced. And the Imperial officials just said, maybe we should turn these guys into a protectorate. Because one thing that people keep forgetting is that the Emperor wasn't 100% xenophobic. He was okay with certain Xenos races as long as they were willing to work under the Imperium.
Yeah.
But it's how the Sons dictated and how the military contextually saw it.
Yeah.
So Fulgrim said that there is no point in letting these Xenos live because humanity is perfect.
Yeah.
So he had that kind
Well, that's what he thinks anyway.
yeah,
That
only humanity is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rejected the idea outright. No, we got to kill them. And it was probably out of actually pride and more to prove themselves.
Yeah.
And more for him to prove himself. But the Laer were very serpentine, but also very weird type of. There's no actual full description for them because they're all different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
But they did have green guns that could kill Marines. And they had floating coral cities because this is a water world.
Oh, okay.
So this world was completely covered in water. Except for two polar ice caps. And he's like wondering how this world came to it, or how the Laer were able to get the technology to have these floating coral cities.
Yeah.
Yes.
These aren't the what are they called? The carnivores, the shark.
Carcharodons.
Yeah, they the shark.
Nothing to do with
ones?
this.
No, okay.
Nothing to do with this. You're fine. Carcharodons are a chapter thousands of years in the future.
Oh, okay.
So this is still 30k. This is still Horus Heresy.
Oh, this is all still. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, because he doesn't become.
No, this is before Horus Heresy.
Yeah.
So this is all the lead up to that.
Lead up to the Horus Heresy.
Which is why we're going to go through the timeline for you, mate.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just like there's just so much information.
It is
like,
a lot.
I don't
of
know
information.
how. I don't know.
That's why I'm trying to condense it and put into like a nice narrative for you.
Yeah, I don't know how people like. How does it fit?
How I remember it all.
How does it fit in the brain and not push like,
Forgetting to breathe on my locker combination out of my head.
No, but it's like the I don't know, is it The Simpsons where like he gets like some new information and then he forgets how to drive?
Yeah.
It's like every time I learn something new, it pushes some old stuff out of my brain.
It's like that. It's like how is it all fitting in there? But yeah, there's typical Warhammer.
Yeah. So we'll take a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like process.
So this is before Horace became trader.
Yep.
But this is
So
also
this
not.
is all 30k. So this is like would be in the years of like so.
This is when all the Primarchs were on the Imperium side.
Yeah.
The Emperor is still walking around.
So yeah, Emperor's not dead. Like all the Primarchs are still there. So would you say just for as like a timeline? Because that's where I'm having the problem with putting everything.
This is in the beginning.
Yeah. So what year
M30. Millennium 30.
is when he found his brothers?
Yes.
So this is
So
30k.
40k takes place as M41, Millennium 41. This is Millennium 30.
Okay, and Millennium 30 is when the Emperor finds his sons, like in this 10,000 year time span, or
No. So M30, the Emperor finding his sons takes place over 200 years.
okay. Because is it 30k goes from
So Horus Heresy, everything that happens with the Primarchs, everything that happens about the Siege of Terror, all happens within M30 and M31,
okay,
quote unquote.
yep,
10,000 years, 40k.
yeah. That's what I'm saying. So everything happened not in in 10,000 years. So
So this didn't happen over a 10,000 year span. This only happened in about 200 or so years in M30.
okay, and then Horus Heresy and all that happens,
Horus Heresy and Siege of Terror happened in this little time frame here.
and then 10,000 years,
And then 10,000
happens.
years later, 40k.
So it takes that long for them to, because that's what I was trying to work out as well. Like, how long does it take to Fulgrim to go from
Normal to
a
Snake.
Space Marine to Snake? Like,
Shockingly short.
okay, because that's what I'm trying to work out. Is it like
This is where I'm getting to.
is it like 10,000 years happens, and over that 10,000 years he becomes a snake?
So all the Demon Primarchs and all that kind of stuff happened in M30.
Yep.
And then after that, all the Loyalist Primarchs disappear for their own various reasons.
Yep.
All the other Chaos and Traitor Primarchs are either dead or they've gone into hiding,
Yep.
or they've just chased their own desires and pleasures.
Gone to the warp.
Yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
Eye of Terror. 10,000 years later.
Okay.
Very little happens with the Primarchs in that time period.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff seems to happen. Like,
It's very mainly what happens here in the beginning, and then what's here is at the other end.
yeah. Okay.
I don't
So
want
what-
you gifting this.
So is it like it's almost like 1,000 years, a block of stuff happens, then 10,000 years,
10,000 years of humanity degrading
Yeah.
and falling into religious zealotry,
Yeah.
and then M40,
Okay.
Millennium 40, which is where 40k takes place.
Yeah. And then Primarchs start coming back.
Yes,
Chaos, like
the Chaos Primarchs start coming back.
Primarchs start coming back. Okay. Because they're obviously wanting to finish off the Emperor.
Well, they come back for their own reasons, but yeah, but it's also just because GW is bringing out their models. So
Yeah.
that's the meta reason. But it is different, like varied reasons.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So are we somewhat okay on the timeline now?
Yeah, because that's what I was trying to work out. Like, when I know this was all 30k,
Mm-hmm.
but like, is this happening over like a span of like,
This is literally happening over the span of like 200 to 300 years.
yeah, okay, that makes a bit more sense. Is this like a, going over like, does it take them like 1,000 years to do this like one little battle or something? But it seems like it's very
It's not 40k is grimdark, but it's not that grimdark.
okay.
Like it's shocking, especially when a battle involves Space Marines. It's sometimes shockingly short.
Okay.
So yes, so this all happens in the space of 200 years.
Yep.
So they're attacking the layer,
Yep.
these Serpentine people. This is before the Horus Heresy and 30k.
Yep.
These Leia are defending the main temple ferociously. And as Fulgrim and his Phoenix Guard and his Marines are walking through this giant temple, they're seeing very weird shapes in the statues and very like almost demonic looking heads coming out of the statues with curved horns and strange epitaphs and all over the place.
Okay.
There's also like this feeling, this suffocating darkness, and it's like as if it was greedy for light.
Yeah.
But in the middle of the chamber, they found a bunch of Leia in a drug-fueled. Welcome to the impromptu ending of part 1 of an episode that we didn't think we were going to have to split into 2.
But we have.
There was a lot of information to go through with Fulgrim, so we've decided that we're going to split them into 2 episodes. This is going to be part 1. Next week, we're going to release part 2 and finish off Fulgrim's story.
Yep.
Go through the rest of it.
There was excess.
That's much excess. In excess of too much story of good character.
Yep.
Now, not saying a morally good character, but a good written character.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, we're going to go through that. Thank you again to Gamers Village for sponsoring this video. As you can tell, the quality of our podcast has gotten a bit better, obviously thanks to their help and their support.
Yes. A heap of help. Yes.
So please, their information will be in the description below. Show them some love the same way they have shown us love. Spread the love because this is the episode for it, obviously.
Yep. And we've noticed that they're just like they seem to be a lot cheaper. Like they have a website as well. I mentioned this at the end of the other episode.
Cheaper, availability, and great atmosphere.
Oh yeah. Like I went there for a tournament last weekend or the weekend before, and I was just planning on going there for like maybe 10 minutes, and I was there for like 4 hours. Very friendly. So
Yeah.
yes.
So yes, thank you to them, and thank you to you for putting up with us.
Yes.
So we're going to see you guys next week for the finishing off of this storyline. Thank you very much. Have yourselves a good day.
Bye.
Like and subscribe,
Yes. Like, subscribe.
please.
Bye.
For the glory of chaos!